He dumped his pregnant wife for a younger mistress now. She's a millionaire without him. Meet Natalie Whittaker, a woman whose heart once brimmed with unwavering devotion for the man she believed would stand beside her through every obstacle. Little did she know, her husband, Richard, harbored a secret desire for new thrills, a yearning that would ultimately drive him to abandon their marriage and their unborn child. What unfolds next is a tale of heartbreak, betrayal, and the extraordinary path that turned Natalie into a self-made millionaire. Now, with her success echoing from conference rooms to charity galas, she's the one calling the shots. Strap in for twists, turns, and a dose of karma you won't soon forget. Natalie Whittaker first noticed something was off when Richard started coming home late from his managerial job at Tennyson Real Estate. Richard had once been punctual to the point of obsession. He believed timeliness was the hallmark of a man with a plan. Then, without warning, he began working overtime. Initially, Natalie chalked it up to professional ambition. After all, they shared dreams of a comfortable home in the suburbs, perhaps starting a business together, and raising their soon-to-be child in a stable environment. She was 3 months pregnant, glowing with excitement and maternal anticipation. But the late nights grew more frequent. Richard's phone seemed glued to his hand, and he guarded it like a treasure chest of secrets. Whispers that once accompanied romantic confessions turned into curt one-liners. Natalie tried to reason with herself. Maybe the stress of an upcoming child was weighing on him. Maybe he felt the crush of financial responsibility. She tried to assuage her mounting suspicion with the logic of love that perseveres, love that forgives, love that endures life's storms. So she convinced herself that what truly mattered was the life within her, a growing spark of hope. Despite the hormonal fluctuations, the morning sickness, and the swirl of anxiety, she maintained a bright smile whenever he walked in the door. She still prepared him dinner, though the dinners often sat untouched because he claimed to have eaten at the office. She still tidied the living room, anticipating the moment he'd collapse on the couch and cuddle up with her to watch their favorite shows. But that moment never came. He was either too tired or claimed to have more work to do. One rainy evening, as thunder rattled the windows of their modest condo, Natalie was startled by the sound of the front door slamming. Richard, dripping from the storm, stood in the foyer glaring at her as though she'd committed some grave offense. Before she could greet him with her usual warmth, he threw down his soggy briefcase and muttered, "We need to talk." The tone sent a chill through her. Her heart pounded, because in those 4 words, spoken with cold finality, she sensed the unraveling of everything they had built together. Richard demanded that they separate. He spewed a list of reasons he wasn't happy. They'd grown apart. He wasn't ready for fatherhood. He needed freedom. The words assaulted Natalie in quick, cruel bursts, each one slicing her like the shards of a broken mirror. Her pleas and tears did nothing to soften him. It was as though he had steeled himself for this moment, forging a resolve that brooked no argument. He simply repeated, "This isn't working. I'm sorry." The desperation in Natalie's voice escalated. "We have a child on the way," she sobbed. "How can you do this now?" Richard's face registered a flicker of pain, but it vanished before she could fully recognize it. He replied with something she never expected to hear, "I know this is terrible timing, but I can't live a lie." She felt her world collapse. Every memory, the spontaneous road trips, the shared coffee runs at Starbucks on chilly mornings, the vows they exchanged in front of friends and family now seemed meaningless. He was gone, and he was taking with him the naive innocence she once had about love and commitment. What Natalie didn't know at that moment was that this was only the tip of the iceberg. While she battled an avalanche of emotions, Richard had already orchestrated his exit strategy. He'd rented a pricey apartment across town, one far beyond what they could afford under normal circumstances. More shocking yet, he already had someone waiting there for him, a woman named Isabel, a bright-eyed 20-something who basked in the glow of Richard's attention and entertained him with her impulsive flirtations. And so began Natalie's harrowing journey, abandoned, pregnant, and desperate for answers. Yet a spark of strength lay hidden in her soul, waiting for the right moment to ignite. One day, that spark would become a blaze, and not even Richard's betrayal or Isabel's allure could extinguish it. The day after Richard left, Natalie awoke in a haze, her face stained with the dried tracks of tears. She stared at the empty side of the bed where he once slept, where his presence had been a comfort, a promise of unending love. Now that space felt like a gaping abyss, a testament to his abrupt departure. Her phone buzzed incessantly, messages from worried friends, missed calls from her mother. She knew she had to face them eventually to say, "Yes, it's over. Richard left." The prospect of uttering those words made her stomach churn. She kept turning the phone over in her hands, trying to summon the courage to open her messages. Even the simplest text, "Are you okay?" felt like a trap. She wasn't okay, and she had no explanation to offer beyond betrayal and heartbreak. By mid-afternoon, she braved the shower, letting hot water pummel her tense shoulders. The steam might have eased her physical aches, but it did nothing for her soul. She pressed her hand against her lower abdomen, thinking about the child growing within her. That child was now the only reason she could find to get out of bed, to eat, to face the day. The baby represented hope, a possibility that her future didn't end because Richard had chosen someone else. Determined not to let her emotions paralyze her, Natalie pulled on a comfortable sweater and leggings, then ventured out to the local grocery store. She needed essentials. The baby needed prenatal vitamins, healthy foods, and a stable environment. As she picked up fresh fruits and leafy greens, her gaze drifted to couples strolling by, a husband holding his pregnant wife's hand, a pair of newlyweds giggling over dessert choices. Her chest constricted at the stark reminder of everything she had lost. At the checkout line, she was greeted by a former neighbor from her old apartment building, Miss S. Turner, who was known for her unstoppable curiosity. "Natalie, dear, how is that handsome husband of yours?" The older woman chirped. The question stabbed Natalie in the heart, but she forced herself to smile politely. "He's not living with me anymore," she managed to say. Miss S. Turner's face crinkled with concern and confusion. "Oh dear, I'm sorry to hear that. You poor thing. Do you need any help?" Natalie shook her head, politely declining. The exchange felt both humiliating and surreal. On her way home, she passed by the Starbucks, where she and Richard used to grab lattes every Friday morning. A memory slammed into her, the first time they'd ventured there as a couple. He had teased her about her complicated order, a grand soy latte with extra foam, and she had teased him about his black coffee with 3 sugar packets. She could almost hear his laughter again, feel his arm around her waist as they stood waiting for their drinks. Now, the shop sign felt like a mocking ghost of the happiness she once knew. That evening, after unloading her groceries, Natalie sat on the living room couch, the silence thicker than any she'd known. She opened her phone at last and responded to her mother with a simple text. "Richard left. I don't know what to do, but I'm trying to cope. I love you, Mum." Moments later, her phone rang. It was her mother, frantically asking questions, voice trembling with concern. Natalie's resolve to keep it together broke. She wept openly, recounting the confrontation with Richard, the callousness of his departure, her confusion about the future. Her mother offered to fly in to support her. "No, Mum, I need to handle this on my own," she insisted. "I'll let you know if it gets too overwhelming." When she ended the call, there was a glimmer of pride within her tears. She realized something monumental. Her independence had always been there, beneath the layers of wife, partner, caretaker. She loved Richard, but she wasn't helpless without him. That night, she forced herself to write down the first steps toward her new reality. 1. Hire a lawyer, someone who could help navigate the separation and safeguard her and her unborn child's rights. 2. Schedule an appointment with her OB-GYN to make sure stress wasn't harming her pregnancy. 3. Look into part-time income or remote jobs. Richard might have been the primary breadwinner, but she was determined to stand on her own 2 feet. As she wrote, a tear slid down her cheek, but her hand remained steady. She was anchored by a fierce maternal instinct, a protective drive she never knew she possessed. Even if her world had been shattered, she was determined to rebuild brick by brick, day by day. The next day, under a grey sky that matched her mood, Natalie trudged into a lawyer's office. She had never even contemplated needing a divorce attorney. Her vision of marriage involved growing old together and celebrating each other's achievements. Yet here she was, a cardboard folder of personal documents clutched in her hands, feeling simultaneously anxious and resolute. Cynthia Morrison, a friend of a friend recommended by her mother, welcomed Natalie into her office with warm professionalism. After offering her a seat, Cynthia explained the process of legal separation and the steps they'd need to take to ensure child support. The conversation was practical, but each step felt like swallowing shards of glass. Filing for divorce, requesting spousal support, negotiating custody, these were words she never thought she'd associate with her own life. Yet hearing them from Cynthia gave her a sense of control. At least now she had a map, even if the terrain looked daunting. Later that evening, as Natalie scrolled through her social media, feed a mindless habit she'd acquired to distract herself, she stumbled upon a photograph that jolted her entire body. It was Richard, beaming alongside Isabel. She appeared younger, carefree, clad in a trendy outfit that suggested indulgence in luxury stores. The pair stood outside a French bistro downtown, arms wrapped around each other. The caption read, "With my love, enjoying a new chapter, #blessed, #new beginnings." Natalie felt as though the air had been knocked from her lungs. The brazen display of affection, of a new life, left no room for the illusions she had clung to. Any hope that this was a temporary lapse in Richard's judgment evaporated in the face of that photograph. Not only had he left her while she was pregnant, he was proudly flaunting his new relationship as though he'd finally been released from some prison. Her initial reaction was to throw her phone across the room, but then anger took hold. How dare he celebrate while she carried his child alone, struggling to piece together her life? How dare he trivialize the vows they shared? Tears of fury welled up in her eyes, but in the depths of that anger, a new resolve was born. She realized something crucial. She could either remain the wounded, discarded ex-wife, or she could transform her pain into a catalyst for something greater. That realization didn't come gently. It was fueled by heartbreak, righteous indignation, and a will to protect her unborn child. But it crystallized in her mind. She had to build a new life, and that life needed to be one she was proud of. Let Richard have his shallow escapades. Let him indulge in illusions of youth and excitement. Natalie had real responsibilities and real dreams to fulfill. Taking a deep breath, she picked up her phone from the floor. She responded to a text from Cynthia, confirming she was ready to proceed with the paperwork. Then she opened an email from her former college roommate, Aisha, who now ran a small design firm. The subject line read, "Possible opportunity?" Intrigued, Natalie clicked it open. Aisha wrote that she had just landed a major contract with a local non-profit organization aiming to revamp their entire marketing platform. They needed someone adept at project management and administrative tasks, someone reliable. Could Natalie be interested in coming on board, at least on a part-time basis? Natalie stared at the email. She had experience as an administrative coordinator before she married Richard, but she'd given it up when she moved to his city. The prospect of working again excited her, though fear nibbled at her thoughts. Could she handle this responsibility while navigating a pregnancy and emotional turmoil? But then she remembered her vow to shape a life she could be proud of. She typed a reply without hesitation. "I'm interested. Let's talk details." Weeks passed in a blur of appointments, phone calls, and emotional ups and downs. Natalie formally filed for divorce, taking the first step in unraveling the legal knots that bound her to Richard. She simultaneously delved into her new job with Aisha's design firm. Part of her questioned whether she could juggle it all, but each day she discovered fresh reserves of strength. Her mornings began with journaling, a habit she picked up during her therapy sessions. Dr. Alvarez, her therapist, suggested she use the journal to process her grief, rage, and hopes. At first, Natalie wrote timidly, as though afraid her emotions would come alive and overwhelm her. But soon, she found herself pouring her heart onto the pages, venting every thought that swirled in her head. This practice became her lifeline, a way to navigate the chaos of her life. Aisha's firm thrived on creativity. Though Natalie's role was administrative, she often found herself peeking into the brainstorming sessions, absorbing the excitement of new campaigns. Before long, Aisha noticed Natalie's keen eye for design and marketing possibilities. She encouraged Natalie to contribute ideas, eventually giving her a chance to manage smaller projects. With each successful task, Natalie's confidence grew. It was like waking up from a nightmare and realizing daylight still existed. One evening, after an exhausting but fulfilling day, she returned home to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a handwritten note from Richard. The words on the page were contradictory, laced with guilt and defiance. He wrote that he was sorry for the timing, but also insisted she accept the reality that they had grown apart. He rationalized his relationship with Isabel as something that just happened and asked for an amicable resolution to their divorce. Natalie read it twice, tears sliding down her cheeks. In a strange way, the note offered closure. It confirmed that Richard's betrayal wasn't a momentary lapse, but a conscious decision. He was done, and so was she. Rather than respond with anger, she tucked the note away. She had more pressing matters, like her next ultrasound appointment. At the doctor's office, an ultrasound technician guided the transducer over her belly, and the screen came alive with the form of a tiny baby. The technician pointed out the developing hands, the heartbeat flickering like a small, determined light. Emotion overwhelmed her, but this time it wasn't just sadness. It was awe, wonder, and a fierce, protective love. She recorded the heartbeat and stored the ultrasound images in her phone. One day, her child would see that from the moment Natalie learned about her pregnancy, she fought every day to bring them a stable, loving world. On her way out, she decided to indulge in a warm drink at Starbucks. It was an emotional test, walking into the place she had always associated with Richard. But she realized that her memories didn't belong to him alone. They were a part of her life too, and she had the right to create new memories here. As she sat down with her latte, laptop open, she reviewed a marketing pitch she planned to deliver to Aisha the next morning. She felt the baby kick for the first time, a delicate flutter that nearly made her gasp out loud. A smile crept across her lips. In that moment, she felt the intangible shift, a sense that her life was not defined by Richard's abandonment, but by her choices. She was forging her own path, fueled by the love she had for her unborn child and the love she was learning to have for herself. While Natalie was diligently rebuilding her life, Richard and Isabel basked in their honeymoon phase. They moved into a luxurious high-rise apartment downtown, complete with a rooftop pool and a view that overlooked the city skyline. Isabel posted pictures on social media, each snapshot capturing exotic dinners, spontaneous getaways, and shiny gifts that Richard lavished upon her. Their captions read like taunts: living our best life, chasing dreams, power couple. It seemed, on the surface, that they were enthralled by each other's company. Behind the glitz, however, cracks were forming. Richard's job was demanding, especially now that he was paying for a penthouse he could barely afford. He was also receiving letters from Cynthia Morrison, Natalie's attorney, warning him about overdue spousal support payments. Whenever those letters arrived, Isabel would roll her eyes. "Can't you just handle this?" she would say, feigning disinterest. She liked the idea of being with a successful older man, but she didn't want to be burdened by the baggage of his previous marriage and pending child. Desperate to maintain Isabel's interest and keep up appearances, Richard worked longer hours, pushing for bigger sales at Tennyson Real Estate. The stress mounted, but he pressed on, convinced that he could provide Isabel with the lifestyle she seemed to crave. At the same time, he ignored Cynthia's repeated notices, convinced that he could somehow negotiate a minimal payout. After all, he rationalized, Natalie was capable of supporting herself. She had a new job, didn't she? However, those illusions of control began to slip when he discovered how determined Natalie truly was. The details of her legal demands were unyielding and entirely justified: child support, a fair share of their marital assets, and coverage for prenatal and postnatal health care. Richard grumbled to his own lawyer, complaining that Natalie was being unreasonable. His lawyer, a dispassionate man named Larson, disagreed. "She's entitled to these terms, especially considering your child's well-being," Larson said. "We can attempt negotiation, but the courts favor the mother, particularly in a case like this." That night, Richard returned home to find Isabel sprawled across the white leather couch, scrolling through her phone, a bored expression on her face. She didn't even look up when he entered. "Hey," she murmured, "did you close that big sale you mentioned? We need to book flights to Cabo next month." A flicker of annoyance crossed Richard's face. "I'm working on it," he said through clenched teeth. He tossed his keys onto a table strewn with designer shopping bags. The apartment was cluttered with items. Isabel had recently purchased a pair of brand-name heels, a Givenchy perfume set, and expensive decor pieces. Each new acquisition chipped away at the savings he once had, but he couldn't bear to voice his concerns. He was convinced that if he just held on a bit longer, a large commission would solve everything. Yet as he stood amidst all these tokens of luxury, pangs of regret gnawed at him. He thought of Natalie, the woman he once pledged to love forever. She had never demanded extravagance. She found joy in small things: a simple picnic, a weekend trip to the countryside, a heartfelt letter. Now, the only messages he received from her were reminders about legal obligations he had tried to avoid. Late into the night, Richard lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Isabel slept soundly beside him, oblivious to the turmoil swirling in his mind. A part of him whispered that his life had spiraled out of control, that he had made a grave mistake leaving Natalie. But he shoved that thought aside, convincing himself that if he could just secure the next big real estate deal, everything would be fine. This was merely a phase, a rough patch. His grander ambitions would triumph, and he would prove to everyone, especially Natalie, that he wasn't the villain she might believe him to be. Unbeknownst to Richard, the woman he left behind was no longer the passive, pleading wife he remembered. She was forging a new identity day by day, one filled with purpose, strength, and budding success. And soon, fate would place them both on a collision course that neither could have anticipated. For Natalie, life's turning points often arrived in subtle disguises. One such moment occurred on a chilly fall afternoon when Aisha invited her to a meeting at a local non-profit headquarters. The building housed a remarkable organization called Kids Path, which provided educational resources and mentorship programs for underprivileged youth. They were desperate for a new digital presence, a complete overhaul of their website, social media campaigns, and promotional strategies. As Natalie listened to the non-profit's director, a spark illuminated her eyes. Their mission resonated deeply. She had always cherished the idea of empowering children, giving them opportunities to succeed regardless of their socio-economic backgrounds. That synergy of personal passion and professional skill ignited a fire in her. She carefully took notes, asked pointed questions about their target audience and budget constraints, and proposed an outline for a phased project plan. By the end of the meeting, the director was visibly impressed. "You've got a sharp mind for strategy," she told Natalie. "We'd be thrilled to work with you on this." Aisha beamed, proud of her friend's newfound confidence. But she also recognized that Natalie might be capable of more than just project management under someone else's umbrella. Later that evening, after everyone had left the firm, Aisha pulled Natalie aside. "Do you ever think about starting your own consulting company?" she asked. Natalie's eyes widened. "My own company? That's a huge leap, Aisha. I'm barely holding it together as is." Aisha smiled sympathetically, gesturing to the visible baby bump. "I know you've got a lot going on, but your potential is undeniable. I see how you light up in these meetings. You're not just following instructions, you're leading. Maybe not now, maybe after the baby is born, but keep it in mind." That night, Natalie lay awake, pondering Aisha's words. The idea of running her own business intrigued her. She imagined a small consultancy specializing in marketing and branding for non-profits and socially conscious startups organizations that truly aim to make a difference. The notion of combining her professional expertise with a desire to do good in the world made her heart soar. Yet reality intruded. She was 7 months pregnant, grappling with a divorce, and strapped for cash, even with her part-time work. Where would she find the capital, the time, or the emotional energy to start a company from scratch? But the dream refused to die. She began devoting her spare moments to researching small business grants, crafting a provisional business plan, and brainstorming a name. That was how Ascendant Vision Consulting was born, initially just a name scribbled in her journal, but soon morphing into a tangible plan with mission statements, service offerings, and a skeletal website. With renewed vigor, Natalie tackled the Kids Path project. It became a prototype for her future ambitions, a testament to what she could achieve if she poured her passion and expertise into something she believed in. The project flourished. The non-profit's website traffic skyrocketed, donations doubled, and partnerships formed with local schools. Word of mouth spread quickly in the non-profit community, leading to more inquiries about the marketing firm behind Kids Path's transformation. Meanwhile, Cynthia continued to navigate the legal labyrinth of the divorce. Richard remained evasive, often missing deadlines for financial disclosures. But each missed deadline only strengthened Natalie's case. The court was unsympathetic to Richard's delays. Eventually, Cynthia informed Natalie that she might be entitled to a significant settlement and monthly child support once the baby arrived. Every so often, in the quiet hours of the night, Natalie's mind drifted to Richard. She wondered how he was coping, whether he felt even a twinge of regret for abandoning her. But each time, she reminded herself that she had a new path to follow, one that required all her focus. She refused to be shackled by the past. While Natalie found her stride in new endeavors, Richard's carefully constructed illusions were crumbling. His high-pressure job at Tennyson Real Estate saw cyclical fluctuations. When sales dipped, commission checks shrank. The strain of financing an extravagant lifestyle with Isabel bore down on him. Credit card bills multiplied, with interest piling higher each month. In the midst of it all, Isabel's fondness for shopping sprees and upscale getaways never wavered. One evening, Richard returned home, exhausted from a fruitless day of showings. Isabel was sprawled on the couch, phone in hand, complaining that her friends were all traveling to Bali this season, and she felt left out. She demanded that Richard plan a similar trip for them soon. Guilt and frustration warred within him. He didn't want to disappoint Isabel. He feared losing the only semblance of excitement and affection he had left. So he dug deeper into his dwindling savings, promising they'd jet off to Bali the following month. It felt like a sickening replay of the scenario he'd once avoided with Natalie. Back then, his ambition had always been to ensure security, not frivolity. With Isabel, he found himself trapped by her expectations of instant gratification. But in weak moments, Richard told himself that perhaps he deserved this. He had chosen youth and excitement over commitment and loyalty. Now, he was paying the price, and the price was steep. His dissatisfaction peaked one chilly evening when he took Isabel to a trendy rooftop lounge. The city lights glittered below, the music pulsed with an electrifying beat, and wealthy patrons mingled. Isabel sipped her cocktail and engaged in flirtatious banter with a group of stockbrokers at the adjacent table, ignoring Richard completely. He felt invisible, a mere wallet with a pulse. The pang of jealousy and regret in his gut became too big to ignore. He excused himself to the restroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. Who had he become? It struck him how lonely he felt, even in the presence of the woman he claimed to leave Natalie for. At least with Natalie, he never questioned his sense of belonging or self-worth. The mirror offered no comfort, only a reflection of a man tangled in mistakes. He returned to the table, feigning a smile. Isabel barely noticed. She was too busy showing off her new designer handbag to the stockbrokers. That night, while Isabel slept, he scrolled through social media out of habit and noticed something curious: references to a marketing success at Kids Path, a non-profit. Tucked within the congratulatory posts was a snippet of praise for Ascendant Vision Consulting, headed by the incredibly talented Natalie Whitaker. The words jolted him. He recognized that name. He knew that ambition, that flair for organization. His ex-wife was forging a path, one that apparently involved launching her own consultancy. A swirl of conflicting emotions gripped him. Pride, perhaps. Jealousy? Most definitely. Guilt? Overwhelmingly. He thought about messaging her, something along the lines of "Congratulations" or "I'm glad you're doing well." But an invisible barrier prevented him. How could he congratulate the woman he left when he was the one who initially doubted her potential? Instead, he shut his phone off and tried to sleep. The city lights danced across the ceiling, reminding him that not all that glitters is gold. Natalie's final trimester brought with it physical discomfort, sore feet, difficulty sleeping, bouts of heartburn, but also an electrifying sense of anticipation. The closer she got to her due date, the more she focused on building a stable world for her child. She had managed to save a modest amount from her part-time work, and as Ascendant Vision Consulting garnered more interest, she began planning for an official launch once the baby was a few months old. Every day, she felt the baby move, a reassuring sign that life went on inside her, despite the storms swirling outside. She transformed a spare bedroom into a makeshift nursery with soothing colors and a second-hand crib she found in excellent condition. One evening, she hung a mobile above the crib, delicate stars and moon shapes that sparkled when they caught the light. A tear of gratitude slipped down her cheek. She couldn't wait to meet the little soul who had already given her life new purpose. In the final month of her pregnancy, she received a surprising phone call from Tennyson Real Estate's legal department. They wanted to confirm certain aspects of her separation from Richard, possibly in anticipation of some internal policy changes. The conversation was brief, but it left her with a jolt of curiosity. Why would Richard's company care about her status? It wasn't long before she discovered the reason. News broke that Tennyson Real Estate was restructuring, cutting costs, and consolidating roles. Richard's position was deemed redundant, and he was on the verge of losing his job unless he could prove he was indispensable. Natalie felt a pang of sadness. Regardless of what he had done, he was still the father of her child, but the sadness was tempered by the knowledge that this was the life he chose. He had gambled everything for a fleeting thrill, leaving her to struggle alone. Now the consequences were catching up to him. In a rare moment of weakness, she contemplated calling him, offering some comfort or advice. But she quickly dismissed the idea. They were no longer partners in life. His choices were his own, and so were hers. Her priority now was her child, her new career, and her emotional well-being. As her due date approached, Natalie went through the final legal steps to secure her divorce settlement. Cynthia informed her that the courts ruled in her favor for a fair share of the marital assets and mandated child support. In theory, it was a victory, but the lingering question loomed: would Richard even have the means to pay if he lost his job? Natalie's water broke 2 weeks early. Alone in her apartment, she felt a surge of panic, but managed to remain composed enough to dial 911. Soon, she was en route to St. Joseph's Hospital, heart pounding with adrenaline and worry. She had planned a more methodical approach to labor an overnight hospital bag, a steady drive to the maternity ward, perhaps a calming playlist. Instead, she found herself in the back of an ambulance, breathing through contractions. Her mother arrived at the hospital within hours, anxiety etched into her features. She fussed over Natalie, offering words of encouragement and wiping the sweat from her forehead. As the contractions intensified, Natalie clung to her mother's hand, tears mixing with sweat. "I can't do this," she whimpered at one point, but her mother, eyes brimming with empathy, whispered, "You already are, sweetheart. You're stronger than you know." After an agonizing labor, Natalie welcomed a tiny baby girl into the world. The moment the infant was placed on her chest, everything else receded: Richard's betrayal, the financial uncertainty, her worries about the future. None of that mattered in the face of the new life staring up at her with wide, curious eyes. She named her daughter Maya. In the days that followed, Natalie felt as though she were learning an entirely new language: diapers, midnight feedings, quiet lullabies in the small hours of the morning. Each time Maya cried, Natalie's heart clenched, but she discovered reservoirs of patience and love she never knew she possessed. Exhausted but joyful, she often simply watched Maya sleep, marveling at the miracle of her existence. Richard didn't visit. Part of her had expected that. He sent a text, a curt hope, "Everything went well, congrats." She didn't bother responding. She was busy savoring the magic of these first moments with Maya and adjusting to a world in which she was the sole provider of comfort and security for this tiny human. Nevertheless, the specter of financial realities still hovered. Hospital bills were steep, even with insurance. Although the court mandated that Richard share the burden, Natalie knew that enforcement could be a battle. For now, she felt compelled to focus on her recovery and her baby. Thoughts of pursuing back payments or legal threats would come later. One Sunday evening, as she gazed at Maya sleeping soundly in the crib, Natalie felt a surge of motivation. In that moment, she vowed to give her daughter a life filled with love, opportunity, and security. She vowed to show her daughter that even when you've been cast aside, your worth lies in your own hands. She vowed to stand as an example of resilience and ambition, because love, once shattered, can be rebuilt in unimaginable ways. 3 months passed in a whirlwind of late-night feedings, dirty diapers, and stolen naps. It was chaotic yet rewarding, and amidst it all, Natalie found pockets of time to refine her business plan for Ascendant Vision Consulting. The success of the Kids Path campaign had sparked interest among other nonprofits, and offers for freelance work trickled in even as she was nursing Maya. Determined to seize this momentum, Natalie registered Ascendant Vision Consulting as an official business. She used her modest savings to build a professional website, design a logo, and rent a small co-working space that she could use a few times a week. With Maya carefully tucked in a baby carrier or watched by a trusted neighbor, Natalie spent hours on conference calls and client meetings. Her passion for aiding meaningful organizations shone through, and her personal story of perseverance quietly inspired those she worked with. Cynthia, seeing Natalie's resilience, urged her to pursue the financial support mandated by the court. Richard, however, had become elusive. Rumors circulated that he was let go from Tennyson Real Estate after a failed attempt to salvage a major account. Word on the grapevine suggested he was scrambling for freelance gigs, his polished lifestyle slipping through his fingers. Isabel's social media posts had turned bitter, filled with subtweets about broken promises and needing real men who can provide. The relationship was on rocky ground. Natalie felt a twinge of pity for him, but mostly she felt relief that she no longer bore any responsibility for his choices. She had her own battles to fight, raising Maya and elevating Ascendant Vision from a local curiosity to a reputable consulting firm. And fight she did. Her business acumen soared through trial and error. She spent sleepless nights studying marketing trends, devouring books on entrepreneurship, and perfecting her client pitches. Aisha continued to offer support from her own design firm, occasionally collaborating on joint projects that showcased both their strengths. Together, they delivered stunning campaigns for clients in education, community outreach, and environmental sustainability. Slowly but surely, Ascendant Vision became profitable. Clients shared testimonials praising Natalie's work ethic, her ability to empathize with organizational values, and her knack for delivering outstanding results within tight budgets. Before she knew it, she was speaking at local entrepreneur meetups, sharing her story of personal reinvention. Each time she mentioned her journey, pregnancy, heartbreak, and forging a new life, audiences were riveted. After her talks, people queued to hand her business cards, propose partnerships, or simply express their admiration. Life was still hectic. Maya's presence meant that any semblance of a rigid schedule was impossible, but Natalie learned to adapt. Some days, she conducted business calls while bouncing Maya on her knee. Other days, she typed proposals at 3 a.m. after Maya finally fell asleep. Yet through the exhaustion, a sense of purpose fueled her. She was building a future for herself and for her daughter. Amid the flurry of new contracts, speaking engagements, and media buzz around Ascendant Vision, Natalie received an email that nearly made her heart skip a beat. It was from Tennyson Cares, an offshoot philanthropic program started by Tennyson Real Estate. They were hosting a charity gala to fund scholarships for young adults pursuing careers in sustainable housing. The email extended an invitation for Ascendant Vision Consulting to participate as a partner, helping to bolster their marketing strategy. The invitation was surreal. Tennyson Real Estate was the very company that once employed Richard, the company indirectly linked to her tumultuous past. She wondered if the invitation was merely an automated outreach to various agencies, or if someone there specifically requested her firm. Either way, it felt like a full circle moment. Though trepidation fluttered in her stomach, she refused to let personal history derail potential growth. Ascendant Vision was bigger than her past with Richard, and the philanthropic nature of the gala aligned well with her company's mission. She accepted the invitation, meticulously preparing a presentation that showcased how Ascendant Vision could amplify the reach and impact of the scholarship fund. On the day of the meeting, she wore a modest but professional suit, her hair neatly pulled back. A wave of nerves threatened to overtake her as she stepped into Tennyson's gleaming skyscraper, but she reminded herself that she was there on behalf of her business, her future, and her daughter. Inside a spacious conference room, she was greeted by a team of Tennyson executives and PR managers. The meeting commenced smoothly. Natalie delivered her presentation with poise, illustrating the actionable steps they could take to connect with potential donors, highlight success stories, and create engaging content. She referenced her previous success stories, using data and anecdotes to prove Ascendant Vision's credibility. Midway through her presentation, the door opened, and in walked Richard. He looked a shadow of his former self, thinner, dark circles under his eyes, the confident swagger gone. She paused, her voice catching for a split second. He froze at the sight of her. The room went silent. Trying not to let her composure slip, Natalie continued, but she could feel Richard's gaze drilling into her. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. The Tennyson executives were visibly impressed. One of them stood to shake her hand. "That was brilliant," he exclaimed. "We'd love to have Ascendant Vision on board for this project." Natalie graciously accepted, ignoring the fact that Richard was lingering near the back, waiting for everyone to disperse. Once the meeting concluded, the executives filtered out, leaving the two of them alone for the first time since he'd walked out on her. The tension was palpable. He opened his mouth to speak, his voice shaking. "Natalie, She cut him off gently, not out of malice, but because she felt no need to hear his explanations or apologies anymore. "I'm glad you're well, Richard. Let's keep this professional." Her tone was calm but resolute. His eyes darted to her left hand, noticing the absence of a wedding ring. "I heard about your success, about the baby," he said softly, almost wistfully. She nodded, offering no details. She owed him none. Moments later, she collected her notes and excused herself. As she walked out of the conference room, she felt a swell of pride. She wasn't that timid, broken woman begging for him to stay. She was a force, an entrepreneur, a mother, a woman steering her own destiny. If Richard had glimpsed any regret in her eyes, it was overshadowed by the radiance of her accomplishment. After that unexpected reunion, Richard found himself haunted by what might have been. He'd lost Isabel. She walked out on him a few months earlier, frustrated that his finances were crumbling and that he couldn't maintain the lavish lifestyle she craved. He was now surviving on sporadic freelance real estate consulting gigs, but his debts kept piling up. The tension of living beyond his means had finally snapped. Seeing Natalie prosper, especially in the very building where he once thrived, rattled him. He had always assumed she would remain the same woman he walked away from, fragile, pleading, overshadowed by the responsibilities of single motherhood. The woman who commanded that conference room bore no resemblance to the broken wife he'd left behind. It forced him to confront the magnitude of his mistakes. Desperate for stability, he approached Tennyson's philanthropic division for a position, hoping they'd remember his past accomplishments. They allowed him to handle administrative tasks on a trial basis. That was how he ended up in that conference room, witnessing Natalie's triumph firsthand. The contrast between their trajectories was painfully clear. One day, he summoned the nerve to email her. The message was hesitant, laden with awkward apologies and attempts to reconnect. He offered to be involved in Maya's life, to help out if needed. He stopped short of outright begging, but the undertone was there. Financially strapped and emotionally adrift, he saw a chance to cling to whatever vestiges of family he might salvage. Natalie stared at the email for a long time. Her heart ached for Maya's sake. Every child deserved to know their father's love, if it could be given genuinely. But she also refused to open the door to half-hearted involvement or let Maya be a pawn in Richard's attempts to redeem himself. With careful deliberation, she wrote back, stating that if he wished to be in Maya's life, It would have to be consistent and respectful of her boundaries. He would need to honor the child support arrangement, keep his communication civil and supportive, and earn the trust both she and Maya deserved. To her surprise, Richard responded that he understood. He sounded meek, as though all the bravado had seeped out of him. He asked if he could at least see his daughter. After mulling it over, Natalie agreed to a supervised meeting in a public space, a small park near her apartment. When the day arrived, Richard showed up in plain clothes, carrying a teddy bear. He looked nervous, sweat beading on his forehead despite the crisp weather. Maya, now nearly a year old, gazed at him with innocent curiosity. He tried to engage her, but she clung to Natalie's leg, wary of the stranger before her. Eventually, with some coaxing, Maya took the teddy bear, momentarily distracted by the novelty of it. Richard's face was a tableau of regret and longing. He tried to hold Maya, but she grew fussy, wanting to return to Natalie. He didn't push it. He simply studied her, as though memorizing every detail of the child he had neglected. Natalie watched, torn between relief that he was making an effort and resentment for all he had missed. They parted with no promise of reconciliation, no illusions about their relationship magically healing. Natalie made it clear that if he wanted a role in Maya's life, it had to be on Maya's terms. "Take it one step at a time," she advised gently. Richard nodded, tears pooling in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. For what? She wasn't entirely sure. Maybe for allowing him a chance to glimpse the child he'd abandoned. Maybe for embodying forgiveness she hadn't explicitly granted. As Maya grew, so did Ascendant Vision Consulting. In a short span, Natalie expanded her client list to include small businesses and ethically driven startups, not just non-profits. Her ability to empathize with clients and craft powerful campaigns made her a sought-after figure in marketing circles. Financial security followed, and with it came new possibilities. She upgraded her apartment, enrolled Maya in a reputable daycare that doubled as an early learning center, and even managed to set aside savings for the future. Invitations to speak at entrepreneurial summits and women's empowerment conferences poured in. Each time she took the stage, Natalie felt a rush of gratitude and determination. She spoke candidly about her journey, the heartbreak, the pregnancy, the divorce, the drive to succeed. She wanted other women, especially single mothers, to see that adversity could be a springboard, not a cage. One particularly significant moment arrived when she received an invitation to speak at a TEDx event. The theme was resilience, turning pain into power. She labored over her speech for weeks, wanting to strike the right balance between personal story and universal lessons. In front of a packed auditorium, she delivered a talk that began with the night Richard left and ended with a depiction of the thriving life she had built for herself and Maya. The audience erupted into a standing ovation. After the talk, several women approached her, tears in their eyes, thanking her for offering hope and inspiration. The video of her talk went viral, accruing millions of views within days. Requests for interviews and collaborations skyrocketed. The sudden fame felt surreal, but Natalie took it in stride. Her priority remained Maya, protecting her child's well-being amidst the spotlight. She was cautious about how much personal detail she shared publicly, but she never shied away from highlighting the importance of self-reliance, hard work, and emotional healing. Amid her meteoric rise, rumors circulated that Richard's financial situation had spiraled. Debt collectors were on his trail. He was working odd jobs, even rumored to be driving a rideshare to make ends meet. Natalie learned all this through mutual acquaintances and social media chatter, but she chose not to dwell on it. Her focus lay on cherishing the life she had painstakingly rebuilt. One evening, while scrolling through her emails, she paused at a message from an unknown sender. It read simply, "I see how far you've come. I'm sorry. I wish I had been man enough to stand beside you, Richard. She stared at the words, an emotional storm brewing within her. She felt sorrow for him, but no longer heartbreak. She felt compassion, but no inclination to rescue him. She quietly closed her email and went to check on Maya, finding her fast asleep in her bed. Leaning down, Natalie kissed her daughter's forehead, murmuring a silent vow of gratitude that their future was no longer dependent on Richard's choices. The turning point that catapulted Natalie from comfortable success to bona fide millionaire status came through a strategic partnership with a tech startup specializing in educational applications. They needed a marketing genius to guide their product launch. Given Ascendant Vision's track record, Natalie was their first choice. The startup soared, their app revolutionizing how children accessed learning materials online. In exchange for her services, Natalie had negotiated a partial equity stake in idea. She borrowed from reading business case studies during her late-night study sessions. When the startup went public, her shares turned into a life-altering windfall. Almost overnight, her net worth shot past the $1 million mark. She recalled the day she checked her online trading account to see the numbers. A wave of astonishment nearly knocked the wind out of her. She'd officially become a millionaire. The magnitude of it felt both exhilarating and sobering. She remembered nights spent wondering how she'd afford diapers, how she'd put food on the table without Richard's support. Now she had the means to ensure Maya's future and fund causes she cared about. True to her roots, Natalie didn't plunge into extravagance. She maintained a comfortable home with a proper room for Maya and upgraded a few essentials. But the bulk of her newfound wealth went into business expansion and philanthropic endeavors. She set up a scholarship fund for single parents pursuing higher education, naming it the Whitaker Scholarship for Resilience. The press lauded her as a champion of empowerment, a woman who turned adversity into impact. Meanwhile, Richard's life spiraled further. The loss of his job and the burden of insurmountable debt forced him to file for bankruptcy. Isabel was long gone, posting about her new love on social media with no acknowledgement of her past. Richard took odd jobs, eventually settling on a modest apartment in a less affluent part of town. The lavish furniture, the panoramic views, the designer clothes, all were repossessed, sold off, or abandoned. One day, as Natalie was driving back from a charity event, she glimpsed a figure that looked unsettlingly like Richard. Standing at a bus stop, she wasn't entirely sure it was him, but the stooped shoulders, the haunted eyes, those details registered in the corner of her vision. She kept driving, heart pounding. In a swirl of conflicting emotions, she knew that if it was indeed Richard, he had sunk to a place she never imagined he would be. It was a stark reminder of how drastically life can shift when fueled by poor choices and selfish motives. She breathed a silent prayer for him, though it was unclear what she prayed for his redemption or simply to let go of whatever lingering ties her heart still held. In that moment, she felt only gratitude for the path she had chosen. She had faced heartbreak, betrayal, and the daunting task of single motherhood. And she had risen above it all, forging a life built on integrity, resilience, and love for her daughter. Indeed, she was a millionaire without him, but more than that, she was whole, confident, and free. Thank you for joining me on this turbulent yet triumphant journey of love, lost, self-discovery, and unwavering determination. Natalie's story stands as a testament to the power of resilience, proving that even the deepest heartbreak can become the cornerstone for a remarkable new life. She refused to let betrayal define her, transforming hardship into an empire of her own, making one that benefits not just herself, but also the world around her. If you found inspiration in this tale, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need a spark of hope, and subscribe for more stories that illuminate the incredible strength hidden within the human spirit. Your support helps spread these messages of courage, empowerment, and second chances. Thank you for watching, and remember, every ending can become a powerful new beginning if you choose to rise.